Hello everybody, and welcome to a new series I'm calling Diatribe X. I've basically stolen the format of Detailed Diatribe off of Overly Sarcastic Productions, and I'm not apologizing for that. This series is just basically going to be looking into random things that catch my interests and that I just want to waffle on about. Today's episode is, let's try and figure out what the One Piece is. We generally know what this is about, don't we? It's been a long-established mystery for years and years now, just that the One Piece exists, and we don't know what it is. And I just want to talk about it today and try and go over all the various theories that have been developed over time about it, the general themes of the series and what it could be pointing to what the One Piece is, and finally my own big crazy theory as to what the One Piece is. Stay tuned for that lovely surprise, eh? Okay, let's just get started. So, general summary of it. We should, if you're watching this video, you should know what the One Piece series is about by now. It's the story of some idiot named Luffy trying to become the king of pirates. Using the term idiot on Luffy is the most lovingly adorable term I could use for the guy. Everybody knows he's generally not the smartest tool, and it's just basically part of his character. It's just happy that he's a dumbass, and that simplicity is actually going to be one of the core themes that I'm going to be exploring within the series. So, Luffy's goal is to become the king of the pirates. It's the thing that he shouts out. It's usually the thing that's mentioned in the intros in some way, in some regard. In the little thing at the end of each episode, it's like he's going to become the pirate king and all that. Kaizoku or Noriwa Aru. There, I completely messed up the pronunciation there. So, he will do this by obtaining the One Piece itself, and throughout the story we see his adventures along the way. We generally know it's split up into the four general arcs here. We have the East Blue, which is basically the very, very start of the series, up until the end of Rogue Town and them entering the Grand Line. The Grand Line arc generally starts with them meeting Laboon, going on to Arabasta, and the adventures leading all the way up to the Middle Island, Sabori. Yep. From there we get to the New World arc, and it's generally from Fishman's Island, going through Punk Hazard, all the way up to the current Eggman Island arc, which is kind of what we're on. Nope, sorry, mixed it up. So, actually at that point we get to the Wano arc. Essentially that's kind of considered the end of the New World arc, and that seems to be where, and the start of the Egghead Island Vegapunk arc is considered the final arc. That's what's essentially happening at the time of me writing this. To prevent a lot of complications, as we know, it's a very long series. I'm just going to be basically sticking to the manga for most of my facts here. So, key reasons for that. The anime has a lot of filler, as is expected of a lot of anime out there, but also not just individual filler episodes that are kind of happening throughout the series, but also scenes are expanded upon in the anime without hesitation. Some things may or may not actually... Things that happen in the anime may not be considered canon to the manga itself, even though it appears in canon episodes. Things just get stretched out. Lines may be blurted out in the anime, which at the time was merely a scriptwriter's decision and not actually representative of the core manga itself. Things could be potentially missed out. I don't know what is and isn't in the anime in that regard. I may decide that something within, mentioned in the anime is definitely, obviously, not considered part of the canon, but it may actually be the canon. There's loads of little examples of this here, there, and everywhere that people may not even fully realize are filler. An early example would probably be in Rogue Town. We get a flashback to Gold Roger's execution, back when he was known as Gold Roger. And that little execution scene there, you may remember it as the guards killing Gold Roger and doing the execution before he could actually spurt out further information. The idea being that the guards killed him to stop him. That we can't say is entirely actually properly considered canon or not. It's pretty much not now after we've had flashbacks that then occur during the Wano arc. So you can see the complications here. I'm going to be sticking to the manga. So throughout this, we're just going to be basically talking through about the One Piece and the many problems in trying to figure out what it is, the complications that have occurred throughout the creation of the series. Then we'll go into my theory of it and the evidence for and against that. Okay, let's continue. So, oddly enough, and I think this is probably one of the big key things we need to kind of address in the story, is that the One Piece itself, oddly enough, despite feeling it, despite being the title of the series, isn't actually a core factor of the story. This actually surprised me when I went back for a read-through of the series. So you actually start looking at it, and the One Piece is actually barely mentioned within the manga compared to everything else. The anime kind of really brings it up in its focus. I mean, the name of it's everywhere, finding it's mentioned constantly, the treasures of her. If you think of like that first 50-episode block with Gold Roger saying, "Where are my treasures?" you kind of equate that with the One Piece, so you kind of get it in your head, it's mentioned a lot. But you go through the manga, and it's not mentioned as much as you think it is. Cody's the first to bring it up in Chapter 2. Let's just take that into account here. It's not mentioned at all in Chapter 1. But yeah, it's brought up with the usual thing of wealth, fame, power, achieve it all. Basically, if you're going to become the king of pirates, you're after the One Piece. That's how it's usually brought up, and that happens time and time and again. So, again, when it's mentioned, Gaimon's chapter basically is the first big elaboration of the One Piece, and again, seriously barely mentioned. It's more, I'm going to become the king of pirates. Oh, that means you're going after the One Piece. The king of the pirates is the main focus here, not so much the One Piece itself. So we only really get any major elaboration up until this point. We do see it mentioned easily half a dozen times within the first 200 chapters. But again, it's usually in that format. Luffy meets somebody, he says he's going to become the Pirate King. The Pirate King, that means you're after the One Piece. That line is almost repeated again and again throughout the series to kind of reinforce the importance of finding the One Piece that's required to become the King of the Pirates. It's not until the Boons arc that we get a proper introduction of the One Piece itself and what it means, being that the One Piece is on a place called Raftel. Now, anyone that's a bit ahead of themselves know that that's not the actual name, that it's going to get changed, but I'm going to stick with what it is for now on this. We then, much later on, we're going to get a bit more of a information about this. I mean, we're literally talking 700 chapters later, pretty much. That to find Raftel requires you to have the 4 pornoglyphs that show it. And those 4 pornoglyphs together will make the X marks the spot, basically showing the treasure map. We find out that the Roger Pirates, only them, know where the One Piece is and what it is, to the point where it's like Silver's Raleigh, the first mate of Captain Gold D. Roger, who we now know is the name at this point. He knows where it is, he knows what it is. He's perfectly willing to tell Luffy, but Luffy absolutely refuses, saying that it's not going to be, like, he doesn't want to know what it is, and if he tells him, he'll quit being a pirate, because the whole point is finding out what it is. There is a big mystery behind what the One Piece is, and that's meant to be one of the big key joys of reading the story. Now, it got to the fun point here when I was, like, beginning the research of this and looking into it, that I actually started playing with the idea that maybe what the One Piece actually physically is wasn't a bigger mystery to the characters within the story as it was to us, the audience. We didn't know what it was, but they did. This was a theory I was playing with for a short while here before I remembered the Silver Raleigh scene. It's like I'd partly forgotten that Silver Raleigh's offered up this information because it had been so long since I'd seen that particular episode, and it wasn't until I was reminded that I had to abandon the theory. I was beginning to think that this was going over like a Quentin Tarantino-style what's in the briefcase thing of like, the audience doesn't get to see what's in the briefcase, but the characters do, and I thought that was maybe the case here. So, turns out not so much. Completely, like, debunked theory on my part there, so carry on without that. One of the bigger mentions of the One Piece that comes up here halfway through the series is Whitebeard confirming that the One Piece does exist, which at this point had become a bit uncertain. This became kind of necessary, I think, within generally like the meta of the story, because people were beginning to come up with many different theories of what the One Piece is, and we'll go into those. And it got to the point where it's like maybe we were thinking it was beginning to give a feeling that the One Piece was a more of an esoteric thing. Like the One Piece itself didn't actually exist, but it more represented something that we, the audience, would never find out what it was, a la the briefcase. But then that was debunked again when, in an interview, Oda Eiichiro basically went ahead and said that, yep, there is actually a physical item that the One Piece is. Anyway, getting a bit ahead of myself here. So the biggest thing towards like the mention of it, I think, came in more recent chapters in chapter 968, when Joy Boy, the legendary person of the past in the Void Century basically came across the One Piece at the end of the Grand Line, where he left behind a treasure of unimaginable value, this being known as the One Piece. So one of the bigger complications that kind of came up in my research on this is, again, is the One Piece anything special? Like I said, I got it in my head at one point that maybe, it just wasn't actually a big deal. But this little caption here at the bottom kind of like shows the potential uncertainty of it, where there's a part where it says that the world at large referred to everything that Roger gave as the One Piece. This is kind of a key little problem here, in that the One Piece name apparently comes from the world government. They named it the One Piece, and that's the name that's been spread around the world. In a way, if you think about it, this makes sense. Gold Roger himself wasn't going around pointing out to everybody, this is the One Piece, this is what I found. He just carried on with his adventures. He didn't go about spreading it around. It seems that Goldie Roger is very similar in his personality to Luffy in that regard, in that they're both a bit of an idiots obsessed with adventure. They're not really out to get the accolades and to report their findings. They're just out having fun, and everyone else picks up on it. So the name of the One Piece was actually spread by other parties, besides the people that actually found the One Piece. So again, it's an uncertainty as to whether or not we can actually see the One Piece in a more literal sense of it actually being a physical treasure. And maybe it's actually just a collection of treasures. There's actually nothing special about the individual treasures. You can actually almost imagine it like a giant gold hoard. But again, it seems that Oda's kind of debunked this and mentioned that it's more important than that there's something more to it than that. But again, we start getting more problems along the line here. So we can see with Roger's last words that he didn't mention what it was. He didn't imply it. We can even see from translations of it that it's definitely more special than we could potentially think otherwise. And it almost seems silly for me to kind of like bring this up. Is the One Piece special? To an regular audience person watching the show, of course the One Piece is special. It's like one of the key mysteries of the show. But we can't forget that the show itself isn't exactly presented as a mystery. I keep calling it a show. I'm thinking of it as a manga. The manga itself isn't really presented as a mystery per se. It's an action-adventure. There are clearly mysteries and there is clearly lore. We have things like the Void Century going on. We have all of these past pirates who got up to great adventures. But we kind of need to confirm that there has to be something more to the One Piece. Otherwise, I could spend ages trying to figure out what the One Piece is, only to find out it's a simple treasure chest. But I think at this point, we can clearly decide that, yeah, there's going to be something big to the One Piece. It's not going to be just here's a nice big ruby. I think we would all find that disappointing. And considering the style of the manga itself, I don't think we're going in that direction. So I think we're kind of good. So there are plenty of currently existing theories as to what the One Piece is. You look at places like TV Tropes' Wild Mass Guessing just to get a small picture of just how insane the amount of theories there are. There's a clear lot of them going out there, but at the same time, from interviews from Oda, no one has apparently guessed what it is yet. Although I admit that interview was quite a few years ago now. It's entirely possible someone's come across it, and he's probably not going to say, oh yeah, it's that one. So luckily enough, we don't really know what the answer is yet, and we've had nothing confirmed, and there's been no real key strong piece of evidence to kind of definitively say it's definitely this or that or not. So, but as we can see, there are plenty of them. My personal favorite happens to be the 4Kids theory. This is one that showed up right at the start of the 4Kids dub. I was already years into the sub at this point, watching it via the Kaizoku fan subs, if anyone's familiar with those, and yeah, they were saying they basically presented a survey and said, what do you think that the One Piece is? And it was things like gold, rubies, emeralds, sapphires. And it's like, yeah, it was almost cute to see it being that simplified of like, yeah, it's just literally treasure. And it would be great if they were correct because I'd find that hilarious. But yeah, we can see that there's other ones. We can see that it's more esoteric theories, like it's the friends we made along the way. It's the spirit of the adventure. It's the heart of romance that is part of Romance Dawn. Then we see more physical ones here where it's things like it's in the red line. Like the One Piece has been contained within there. And one of my personal big theories that I really liked for a while was the destruction of the red line would reveal the One Piece. Destroying it would do that. Even going so far as to say that the entire world was One Piece. As in literally destroying the red line would break the barriers between the different oceans destroying the Grand Line in the process and making the world one place, one piece. Then there's more theories which kind of like tie it to an item which is part of like what we've seen within the world itself. We've seen things like the true ultimate devil fruit, the Rio Pornoglyph, Luffy's hat, another straw hat, which was considered a bit crazy until a bit recently when we saw the giant hat. We've seen ones like it being Laboon, it being a map leading to somewhere, it being a book containing collected history of the Void Century. You could read all of these. We're basically talking it's going to be like a MacGuffin, or it's going to be something a bit more simple, like one gold piece. It could simply be a hoax, something that Roger left behind. Again, tying back to items within, like, have been built up within the world, possibly one of the ancient weapons, the island itself, something simple like an eye patch. I love the idea of it being an eye patch. If you think about it, within the entirety of One Piece so far, we have not seen a single eye patch. So the idea of it being an eye patch is a wonderful possibility. A piece of junk lost to time, a reset button, that was an odd one, a piece of 8. The water-based devil fruit, basically giving a person the power over the oceans themselves. A picture of Roger's love. A dress. In Japanese, one-piece is known. The one-piece suit is literally a one-piece dress of sorts. Roboco. If you know anything outside of Shonen Jump, you'll understand that one. No, wait, if you know anything inside of Shonen Jump, you'll understand that one. Basically, there are just a lot of theories here, so they're all generally good and potential, and I can't discount any of them because, yeah, we're talking about a man that loves his goofs and his gags, and Shonen Jump is a manga known for its gags. So anything could be there to completely knock the wind from our sails and, surprise us. And you'd like to think it's going to be something a lot more epic and awesome than any of this. Personally, I'd be pretty disappointed if it was something like one of the ancient weapons, a devil fruit. The devil fruit tree is another suggestion I don't think I included here. No, I don't think I did. I mentioned the true ultimate devil fruit, but not the devil fruit. Oh, the devil fruit tree, it's right there, number 6. Yeah, but I think it being something that's actually useful within the world is almost too game mechanic for it being the answer for the One Piece. You want the One Piece to be something that means something on a larger level. So it being an ancient weapon or a weapon they can use in any kind, or just something that's, something that's almost grabbable and like they could literally use it for something. It's got to represent something more. Whether or not we'll even see the One Piece is also potentially up for debate. You'd like to think that they're going to show it, and again, from what Oda said in interviews, it's going to be revealed as to what it is. So, let's try and dive into what's actually physically known about the One Piece itself. And honestly, throughout the entire series, we've not had anything leading to a clear, strong clue of what the One Piece could possibly be. At least not that I don't think. There's a lot of things we can infer, but there's nothing like, oh, yeah, possibly that, possibly this. I mean, again, unless it's going to end up being one of the ancient weapons, I can't see them turning around and saying that the One Piece is Pluton, because that would just, yeah. Honestly, it would just be disappointing in my opinion. So, but there are plenty of things here. So, again, like I said, the focus on what the One Piece actually is more of a misdirection. We often get the other things that are connected to it. We get the idea of the focus being on the King of the Pirates, becoming the King of the Pirates. We get the focus on how to reach Laugh Tale. We get information regarding the Void Century, where the One Piece seem to exist at most. Although, again, whether or not that's the case or not is still potentially up for debate. I don't think we've really come across any strong clue one way or another to actually say the One Piece is this particular type of object. So, what information do we have? So we know that the One Piece is connected to Laugh Tale. We don't know. It's kind of mostly implied that it's on Laugh Tale. But presumably, Laugh Tale, it's on its own little island some distance away from the Red Line, but pretty much close to it. So that creates an interesting little complication in the situation here of the information of what being King of the Pirates means. So you have to remember, we've kind of been given this information that having the One Piece is what makes you the King of the Pirates. But that's not entirely the case. you become king of the pirates not because you have the One Piece, but because you've circumnavigated the globe. It's not until that point that you actually declared it. So, I mean, this is the interesting thing. Roger didn't take the One Piece with him when he got it. He left it on Laugh Tale, or at least close to Laugh Tale in some way. Getting to Laugh Tale is essentially the final point that leads you to the One Piece. So presumably it's on the island, or at least it then leads to the island. But again, not 100% clear. What the Straw Hats and everyone else is essentially trying to find out is that next step, getting to Laugh Tale, which will then help you get over the red line and presumably back to where Laboon is. The series is probably going to end with them meeting Laboon again after fully circumnavigating the globe and reaching that beginning point. So, yeah, we know the world government has named One Piece. We also don't seem to have implications that anyone's created the One Piece, which is an interesting one. It's like it's mentioned in the Void Century that Joy Boy found a treasure of unimaginable value, but it doesn't really point to it. One thing I also mentioned earlier is that Whitebeard, just before his death, mentioned that the world would be like shaken to its core should the One Piece be found. So again, there's an implication that just finding it has a massive implication on the world. Yeah, so no fakes seem to exist. There's been no mention of this whatsoever, which is again an interesting one. No one seems to have tried to claim that they found the One Piece throughout the world. Again, this led to an earlier theory that I had of everybody in the world of One Piece already knew what the One Piece was, and it's just not being told to the audience. Because when think about it, it's actually kind of odd that no one seems to be saying, haha, I have the One Piece, here's my little gold coin, this is the One Piece, that makes me the king of the pirates, and then Luffy has to kick her ass or something like that for being a liar. Stuff like that hasn't generally happened. We've had fake Straw Hats, we haven't had a fake One Piece yet. Which is definitely an interesting little thing of like, it seems almost an obvious storyline to go for, but maybe they've just decided not to do it. So, and finally, another little point, 2 points here, is Roger couldn't take it with him, or didn't take it with him. It could be that he was happy to leave it on Laugh Tale, where, like, along with some other stuff. But again, other than basically him saying that he left everything in that one place, we don't quite know that. But we do seem to know that finding it wasn't enough to destroy it. Now, we had a previous theory here on, like, the destruction of the Red Line will reveal the One Piece, but there's also no implication of, like, the One Piece is destroyable in any way. So, again, doesn't necessarily mean anything. Roger doesn't necessarily have to have a reason to destroy the One Piece upon finding it. It's entirely possible that when Luffy's and the others will find a One Piece, it will already be, like, in a mess somewhere, so. But in short, that's about it. There's seemingly no clues as to its identity and its structure, only its location. The closest thing that we have to an image of it is literally a bunch of people looking at it, which we can see here with Roger's pirate crew, who just kind of like staring and laughing at it until tears spring to their eyes. Clearly finding it is kind of hilarious in itself. But yeah, that's all we have. And honestly, what with all the theories we've had so far and the information we've had so far, it's actually very little. And I think that's a key thing here. I don't think it's an accident on Oda's part that he didn't want to give too many clues as to what the One Piece exactly it is. He wants it to be a big reveal unto itself. He wants it to be a mystery that we all find out together. So, but we know that the treasure must be a great treasure, an impressive treasure, something that after thousands of chapters isn't going to be a, oh geez, is that it type thing. We want it to be somewhat impressive. We want it to be something that kind of makes everyone sort of laugh. I can imagine that Oda would want to have it revealed in such a way that we had a similar like response to the Roger Pirate. And considering how great the series is at kind of making people laugh and cry, I think that'll be doable. It's just a case of whether or not it will. So I think in order to try and figure out what the One Piece is, with my own personal theory that I'm slowly building up to here, one of the things I want to focus on more is one of the prevailing themes of One Piece. And the main theme of One Piece, besides the action, the adventure, the fun, the ups and downs, is of that of dreams. Everybody in the main cast has a dream. We can pretty much list them all off. Luffy wants to become the king of the pirates, Zoro the greatest swordsman, Nami wants to draw the world map, Sanji wants to find all blue, Usopp wants to be a great adventurer, go on. Does Chopper still have a dream beyond becoming a doctor? Brooke obviously wants to find Laboon. Nico wants to find the Void Century. Frankie had a dream. Oh, jeez. It's been so long with some of the... I guess not all the characters get dreams, but yeah, it's... If I looked it up, I'd probably remember that Chopper's dream is to become the greatest, find Santa Claus or something like that. I honestly can't remember. It's been so long, and poor Chopper just gets so forgotten in the story nowadays. It's just a little sad in my head, but anyway, that's just, yeah. Anyway, yeah, but they all have their dreams, and we see the bad guys having dreams too. Often the bad guy dreams are ones of acquiring power and the like. We often see it in the more tyrant class type villains. So whether or not it's like Axehand Morgan to Arlong to Crocodile, most of them have the idea of like basically owning a large portion of the world and just, ruling over it with an iron fist. We see that like usually the themes of the dreams can be like put into certain ones. We either have like the really, really simple dreams like Luffy's and Zoro's getting the One Piece, becoming the greatest swordsman. They're big, simple dreams. And then we have ones like Crocodile's where it's like his was a multi-factor, multi-layered plan of slowly ruling the Kingdom of Alabasta, where he would basically manipulate the people, run small terrorist organizations, take advantage of a massive drought that was happening. Was he encouraging the drought? I think the drought was just naturally happening. I honestly can't remember back now. It's been literally like close to 2 decades since I saw that arc in full. Although I did read the manga recently, you thought it would have stuck. Anyway. But yeah, you see the idea. The villains usually have big, complex plans, whereas the heroes have more simple plans that just take a lot of work to get to them. Getting to the One Piece has potentially become a bit more complicated, but Luffy's vision, his vision of the dream, remains simple. To him, I find One Piece. I go find One Piece. That is his main focus here. So people achieving their dreams, it's usually the bigger dreams beat the smaller dreams, and the simpler dreams beat the complex dreams. Again, I like to think another good example here is Luffy's dreams versus Bellamy's dreams. Bellamy's, he liked to completely dismiss the idea of dreams, and he just simply wanted to be like rich and own stuff, and hence why Luffy was able to defeat him so easily. Bellamy's dream basically didn't exist. He didn't even see himself as having a dreams. The era of dreams is over is one of his big remembered lines. And Luffy literally defeats him in One Punch Man, and yeah, I think that kind of sums up like the importance of like the simple dreams. The simple dreams are the ones that beat these complex dreams. As time goes by and we kind of like see plenty of little examples of this, not just in Crocodile versus Luffy, but in Arlong. Arlong's plans were quite complex. You have to think of how he was essentially manipulating Nami over the course of decades, just in order to get a few maps. He went via a very complex route, despite having power behind it. Over time, we saw this started getting twisted with things like the Marineford arc. This is where things started getting more complicated. In a way, Luffy's power was essentially too small at this point. His abilities to fight against the world were slowly becoming dwarfed by that of the weight of the world itself. The world government, the Marines, they were simply too strong to fight, and things started getting more complicated for him. To the point where, with his brother's death, he literally passes out from the weight of it all, and he has to be dragged away to recover the best he can before he can come back again with more strength, having gained suitable time-skip power-ups. We're currently hitting a point where everything is insanely complicated, to the point where even the art style feels insanely complicated compared to how it used to be. You compare early chapters and newer chapters, and it is just... I'm not a big fan of the newer art style, but I feel like what Oda's trying to do is make everything look as bombastic and detailed and overcomplicated in its approach. Everything is just multi-paneled madness, chapter to chapter. I'm amazed we can keep up with it half the time. Half the time it feels like a bit of a blur, but there is so much chaotic insanity going on in the world of One Piece. You just have to list them out. Void Century, Ancient Weapons, World Government, Celestial Dragons, Blackbeard breaking the established rules of the Devil Fruits that have already been established by having 2 of them. Literally constant wars happening between different pirate crews. Royals becoming outlaws. Political issues. Plenty of myths and legends in the background outside of the Void Century. So we've got notions like the Will of D existing. And yeah. When it comes down to it, everything about the world of One Piece is chaotic madness at the moment, but Luffy himself remains his simple, dumb, lovable self. So, it is my theory, as we're getting to it, that, I've written it out here, the One Piece will be the biggest, most simplest thing it could possibly be. Hiding in plain sight. And most importantly, it will take all of that chaotic, insane complexity of everything that has come before it and basically dash it aside as it was never there, whilst also changing everything that was there with its reveal. Basically, all of the ancient weapons, all of the complex political matters, Im, or what's he called again? Im, basically the king who like runs the 5 secret elders, the emperor. Im? Yeah, this is going well, isn't it? I'm forgetting basic terms. I'm definitely worthy of giving a theory out of all of this. Anyway, it will all lead to one big reveal, which will basically overshadow everything that was come before. My really clever theory, the One Piece is the red line itself. Specifically, it's a 5 yen coin. Yeah. Almost sounds dumb as I say it out loud, but I reckon I'm coming somewhere with this. So, yeah. Let's look at this. Now, this is a theory I don't think I've seen anyone do before. I looked around when I was like coming to the conclusion of it myself. It almost seems both insanely obvious as a potential like thing to say, the One Piece is literally the red line itself, but also seems kind of insane at the same time. It doesn't seem possible, but I'm really selling this here, aren't I? So, let's look at the world of One Piece and see just how this could potentially work as a theory. The first image we see of the world is Nami's little globe here. Most people will probably remember the anime opening of the map being spread across and we seeing it in a 2D format. But from the manga perspective, this is actually what we see first. We see the world and we see the ground line. And yeah, we see the center of the red line. Basically, it describes everything here. I get the feeling Mariajo wasn't actually established at this point yet, because that certainly isn't a town at the center of the red line. That's an entire kingdom. But yeah, early establishment, that may have been a translation issue, but never mind. But yeah, we basically see it like this, and it distracts from what the red line is. It's basically, we know it's a strip going through here. And yeah, just to be clear, I'm not actually saying it's literally a very small 5 yen coin. I'm literally saying that the red line is a giant 5 yen coin. It's basically a large red coin. It's not magnetic. That was a little bonus thing I found whilst researching 5 yen coins. 5 yen coins are not magnetic like many coins aren't, but specifically like it's like a copper alloy of some kind, which basically prevents it from being magnetic. And it being like a 5 yen coin basically means there's a hole in the middle. I haven't actually got a picture of a 5 yen coin. Future me, put one in now. So yeah, we see this. There's actually 2 types of 5 yen coin. There's an old one and a new one. I'm basically focusing more on the old one simply because it's a similar color to what we know the red line as. But yeah, it has a giant hole in the middle, and I'm saying that hole in the middle is all blue. So I get to compress 2 theories together here quite nicely. It seems pretty reasonable to assume that the One Piece and All Blue are at least connected in some format in my head. It explains how fish from East Blue would get into South Blue and all that. They would literally find a way through the hole and come out the other side. I have a wonderful visual example here if we want to make it a bit clearer. So here we have the world of One Piece. Here's something I kind of drew up using a sketch of like Nami's globe that we saw earlier. And then we take away the oceans and we're just left with the red line itself. And then with that, we can kind of see that, yeah, if you take into effect the idea of like corrosion over time and bits breaking away, that, yeah, you could fit this is a coin shape. You have to kind of remember that like the red line isn't like splitting out into other random directions. We've got a bit of an outcrop here which just goes outside the reach of the coin, but that's not necessarily the red line in itself. Yeah, I would say that you would be able to basically say that like the tops are basically like the eroded parts of the One Piece coin that is the entire planet. And yeah, then I coloured it in because I could. Now, of course, you could argue, there's a good argument here to say that like all of like the erosion and the breakaway pieces here kind of discount it. Not to mention there's a bunch of like jagged mountains and stuff like that on here. Not to mention Maria Jo. I mean, Maria Jo is obviously a newly built thing on top of the red line, so that's not too hard to work around. But the actual jagged parts, yeah, I could see people like complaining about that. My argument would be like, if you want to see it as a coin, there's an old... If you're familiar with Phil Platt, one of the science guys on YouTube, there's kind of a nice theory here of like, basically like if you were to like compress the planet Earth to the size of a bowling ball, it would basically look like a bowling ball. Because basically like the structure of like the rocks and stuff like that, when shrank down to that size, gives a similar feeling of like the rough edge, the roughness of a bowling ball. Basically the idea being that all of our mountains, all of our landscapes, when actually stretched out to that degree, actually ends up being pretty smooth. I'm basically going with that. If you could literally take the red line and compress it to the size of a 5-yen coin, it would kind of work out like this. I mean, my main idea here is literally the world of One Piece is a giant coin. I mean, in my head, that would be a brilliant that would be a thing that the world government would probably want to hide if they were aware of it themselves. I suppose that's another thing. We're not entirely sure if the Five Elders themselves are truly aware of this. I'm kind of going with the idea that they are. Either they are or their emperor is. Emperor Im. I'm sure it was Im. Anyway. So, how it fits. This goes along with like both my themes of it being a big, simple treasure. It's literally the biggest treasure in the world, and it's almost so dumbly simple that it defies belief. It's the type of thing where I can imagine when a lot of people see it, it's going to cause them to kind of like spit, take, laugh, just seeing it, because it's like, oh geez, really? It's just the red line? But at the same time, it's like, oh geez, it's the red line. It also kind of works with a lot of things we've been seeing so far. When Roger saw the One Piece, he laughed. Seeing that big coin is going to be pretty absurd. We also kind of like... One of the things that I'm also leading into here is that the red line is different to all the other islands. It's not magnetic. We know that a 5-yen coin is not magnetic, as I mentioned earlier. That leads into... If you think of like all the log poses of all the islands of the world, like you find them using the log poses, and those islands are distinctly magnetic in a sort of way. That makes them different to the red line. The red line has been established as not being magnetic, so that's kind of a clear different thing here. So we have Whitebeard's words that finding out what the One Piece is will shake the core of the world. That seems a pretty ominous thing. Again, we have some translation issues here. He says in some versions it's the shakes the core of the world. In other versions it's the world will be turned upside down. Both kind of work for the theory of if it's literally the entire world that the One Piece is, that shakes it. So it explains All Blue if it exists quite easily. All Blue is simply a hole at that point. That is literally an ocean in the center of all of the other blues. One of the key things here is I think we actually got a hint towards this in a way that we almost didn't expect when we came to Fishman's Island. Again, yeah, Fishman Island. I've called it Fisherman's Island here, despite the image I've posted suggesting otherwise. This was almost a hiding in plain sight thing. Fishman Island was literally a floating island in the water. Now, we saw ruins underneath it. We'll figure that out, I guess, at some point. That might actually discredit it a little bit. We'll get into, like, the for and against stuff later. So, but you've got to think, it's like, if there's literally a hole, we know there's a hole underneath the red line already. That already has been established, because the Straw Hats use it to get under and out into, like, into the New World, essentially, like after completing the first half of the Grand Line. So Fishman Island doesn't have like a floor underneath it, and they were able to travel under a hole. Now, we didn't get to see a fantastic amount of that hole because, I mean, we were underwater. It was all insanely dark and they used a bubble, so they basically just traveled through it very carefully and came out the other end. So yeah, but basically it implies that there is a hole in the red line and they use it to travel through. A sort of trick's played on us here to imply that the hole wasn't as big as what I'm suggesting it is. If what I'm suggesting it is, it's literally implying that there is no core to the Earth. We'll get to that in a moment. So we also know that the world government does its best to stop people finding out about the One Piece, but the One Piece, the world being a giant coin, would probably be kind of problematic to them. It would make a lot of suggestions that they're probably not going to be too happy about. So I like to think that the theory works with a lot of the information that we've got here. This all leads up to something else I've been hinting at here. So the theory that I've come up with basically suggests that there is a giant hole in the center of the planet. And We should probably understand this a bit better by comparing it to our own one. We know that the Earth has a molten core in the middle of it, and this is basically what helps actually create the magnetic field around the Earth. The Earth is caused by circulating currents of liquid iron in the outer core. If One Piece's world has no core and no outer core, it has no magnetic north or south, which for the Grand Line explains why the log poses have to be used. We know compasses don't work normally on this planet, which is why they exist. I'll get to the North and South Pole later, so I realize I'm already covering points as I'm saying all this, but yeah, basically Fishman Island is kind of around near where the entrance, where the hole is. We basically went insanely deep into the water, but we never really saw the floor apart from some odd ruins. Yeah, so I've got some extra speculation here. It's the red line is mostly the foundation of the planet itself, with the oceans forming around it. It's possible all the islands on the planet are either chunks of the red line that broke off. I don't believe that bit myself, I'm just saying it's a possibility. Or they're literally celestial bodies that crashed into the planet and formed islands over millions of years. We're basically talking asteroids, meteors. They all just crashed into the planets. They had magnetic properties to them in some regard. Those magnetic points are what's being picked up by the log poses. It would explain why that the planet itself has no real magnetic north and south that can be used for navigation whilst on the Grand Line. We know regular compasses work outside the Grand Line, but what I'm theorizing here is, well, speculating, is that they are basically other versions of log poses, which point towards the North and South Pole. Now, we have to remember in the series that East Blue is our only real experience of one of the four blue oceans outside of the Grand Line, and that's in the Northern Hemisphere. So Sanji also comes from the North Blue, so neither he nor Nami can kind of discredit the idea of South Hemisphere compasses working differently to North Hemisphere compasses. I mean, it's entirely possible that basically North Hemisphere compasses are just log poses in themselves that all point towards the North Pole Island, and they're all just eternal log poses which just look different to the log poses. Hence Nami's initial confusion, having grown up all her life in East Blue. So, but yeah, basically that's what I'm saying. I'm basically saying that the ocean and all the other islands are separate or alien to the Red Line itself. So all islands are essentially Fishman Islands. They're floating openly in the sea. This also works to the idea of devil fruits users being hammers. The idea basically being that when they touch the ocean, the devil fruits are separate to the ocean in the way that the Red Line is separate to the islands. So basically, when the two collide, it's like Luffy and any other devil fruit users become weak and they float down. They're actually floating down towards the center of the core, which is dragging them in some way. I'd argue there's literally something in the center of the core of All Blue, which we will find out after all this. I do reckon that one of the big finales of One Piece is going to be to go down into the ocean and find this out. Now, plenty of evidence against the theory. I've mentioned some of it myself here as I've sort of whizzled on. Whizzled on is a perfectly acceptable term to use. I am British. So yeah, obviously not a coin is one of the big prevailing theories. I've kind of gone over that, so there's a nice what if xkcd here link displayed. I'll try to remember to include it in the description, which shows the Phil Platt bowling ball theory, which helps to kind of discount that. So the theory doesn't explain the creation of the Grand Line and the calm seas. It doesn't really explain the reverse mountain jet stream. I would like to argue that the existence of mountain springs in our world would possibly explain this. The Red Line isn't invincible. It has slowly been eroded over millions of years, potentially. It's not out of the question that springs have found their way to break through the Red Line and make their way up, with the idea of reverse mountains slowly being formed over time by currents circulating around the Red Line. Very clear, I'd say, that Laugh Tale isn't actually directly next to the Grand Line due to the 4 pornoglyphs. Poneglyphs. We know where 2 of the poneglyphs are at this point, but 2 of the others, if they're going to do an X marks the spot thing, then presumably Luffy and the crew are going to have to go around Laugh Tale, and it's going to be in the middle somewhere. So the East Blue compass, we're kind of seeing the problems of this at the moment. This is one of probably the big discounts here that we've got. But again, I'd argue that these are essentially eternal log poses of some form that get screwed up when they're in proximity to a lot of other log poses. I'd like to think the information we've had isn't out the question here. So Two of the big problems with my theory is the fact that we have apparently already seen the ocean floor. This kind of discounts the notion of there being no core. Whether or not there is a core that surrounds the red line, like basically if there's just a whole clump of rocks literally surrounding it and like, you know, acting as the One Piece world's core, really doesn't help that the planet doesn't have a name. It's always just the world of One Piece, but yeah. And not to mention Zunisha himself, the giant elephant, which literally walks around outside the Wano Animal Kingdom area. Oh, what's animal? Zo. Yeah. Basically, he just walks around that area in the ocean as if it's no problem, the idea being that his legs are like long enough to reach the floor. These two things are enough to kind of like potentially discount the idea of there not being an ocean floor, like I said. They're not enough, I'd say, to discount the notion of the red line being the One Piece, but it may discount it being what All Blue truly is. At the same time, however, I could simply argue that these islands aren't actually the ocean floor, and this, I mean, it would be a little crappy if it turned out that Hachi's walk on the seafloor was actually like the ocean, wasn't actually the ocean floor and was just other islands. It would be, I mean, it could potentially work. We see ruins on some of these images here, so, but it's generally agreed that he is basically walking on the ocean floor akin to SpongeBob SquarePants and the like. But yeah, this is stuff that generally just discount stuff, but I'm willing to accept it. I'm willing to accept that this isn't a potentially perfect theory, that I'm missing lots of stuff here, but I'm still sticking with it for the moment. Future Matt here. After I finished recording the video, we basically got to the chapters in the manga where Vegapunk gave his big message to the world. That opened up a few can of worms, which would possibly screw up a lot of what I've been saying. So he basically made the two big reveals on top. I mean, he revealed to the rest of the world things like Goldie, Roger, and the like, but he basically made two big assertions from his announcement. One, that the world is actually built on top of an older world, and that the sea level is rising due to the mother flame being used. So, yeah, how do I comment on this? Does it change much of the theory that I've generated so far? I'd like to say I'm doubling down and that it still kind of works. So, yeah. I mean, I could easily argue that the continents below that has been made aware of, I mean, what they are and all that is still kind of potentially unknown, other than that they're an older civilization that came before this other one. I'm going to go with the theory that these are actually still just other islands that have like crashed into the planet, and that the islands that we're familiar with are the islands that have landed on top of them and like, or have been basically built on top of them in some regard. So this actually helps explain a few of the holes that I had before. If we think of like Hachi's Seawalk and the like, and seeing the ruins underneath Fishman Island in that big image of Fishman Island, it kind of like helps establish it. So basically there are just other rocks that are now more floating in the middle of the ocean rather than on top of the ocean, and other continents have been built on there before. So it actually kind of helps explain how Hachi can walk along the sea floor like this. He's not actually working along a true sea floor. He's walking on one of these old continents that are just so eroded now that they look like the sea floor. So yeah, I don't think I have too much to add to it like that. I'm playing with this sort of idea that the mother flame isn't actually causing the sea levels to rise, but more causing the islands to sink. But that could probably go either way and not affect too much either. So yeah. Nothing more to add beyond it to that. I'm just going to insert this in here. Back to past me. And with that, we're essentially done. So yeah, to conclude,